Hi, I'd like to take all of you back 10 years. Do you remember the time when it was normal to break into a ridiculous dance called the Harlem Shake? Or back when it was abnormal to be able to swipe right to find a date? Yeah, 10 years ago, I was at university and I had a Halloween party to go to. So I did what everyone around me was doing, hunting up and down Oxford Street to find an outfit. So back then, I thought I was sustainable. I opted for a skirt that was labeled as a vegan leather skirt. It fit all my boxes. It was definitely the trend of the season. It was cheap, and best of all, it was vegan, so it couldn't be harmful for the environment, right? Well, I was naive. That skirt that wasn't stitched well enough to even last me a second wear would in fact outlive me. Let me explain. Most mock leather is actually made out of plastic, PU or PVC, the kind of plastic that actually takes around 500 years to decompose in a landfill site. And when it does decompose, it releases toxins and microplastics into the environment. So considering that we've managed to double clothing production in the last 10 years, this is a huge problem. More about how huge this problem is later, but just to put things into perspective, at current growth rates, our population would take around 60 years to double in size. But we've managed to double our clothing production since we learned how to hail a cab on an app.
There's only one explanation: overconsumption.
It is human instinct to chase the new. We've done it. This is what we do, and this is what we've always done. We push for progress, we innovate, and then we get bored and look for the next new thing. Newness gives us that micro hit of dopamine. Once upon a time, that meant exploring new lands. But today, that feeling, we get that from wearing a new outfit every time we post on social media. Some call that habituation, a decreased intrinsic response from a frequently repeated stimuli. So in other words, the more we see it, the less it excites us. So we can't blame all of this on human biology. The pursuit of the new has been exacerbated by the rise of fast fashion. Now, fast fashion is very hard to define, but it is characterized by two things: cheap prices and relentless pace. So, it's not like we're not trying to do better. We've all heard of single-use plastic, but fast fashion has now given rise to a new phenomenon, and that's single-use fashion. You might think that's only for the rich and famous, but the data suggests otherwise. One in three young women in the UK consider a piece of clothing to be old after wearing it only once or twice. And half the UK population has admitted to having clothes in their wardrobe they've only worn once or less. So while the greater onus does lay on governments and companies to have better policies and processes, it is we, the people, who are over-consuming. It's not like we're not trying to do better. When we send our clothes to charity shops, we're convinced we've done a good deed. I've often thought that at least my dress will go to someone in need. But I've really got bad news for you, because 84% of the clothes that go to charity shops will end up incinerated or in landfill. And most often than not, in developing countries where it will disrupt their ecology and produce harmful chemicals. In fact, earlier this year, we were able to see a giant pile of clothing in the Atacama Desert, and this was seen for the first time from space. That's how huge the problem is. In fact, it was so ridiculous that they could see it from space, it's now been dubbed as the wardrobe of the planet. So let me repeat that again. A piece of clothing that I bought so frivolously and was only able to wear once would outlive me and possibly the next 5 generations. The discomfort I felt the day I learned that changed everything for me. That discomfort triggered me into quitting my job in finance and building a tech solution. It is this discomfort that fueled my decision to quit my job in finance. I built a fashion tech solution that helps fashion brands to incorporate circular marketplaces within their business. It is this discomfort that encourages me to rally fashion brands to care for where their clothes end up and to demonstrate to them that profit can be made with purpose. And it is this discomfort I stand before you today to ask you to turn from passive consumers like my old self into empowered citizens of the planet. But I get it. It's very difficult to live an eco-conscious life. There's a pile of conflicting data out there, and it is very confusing to know what's true and not. It is also human nature to question the new or to question what we don't fully understand. In prehistoric times, that was a means of survival. But today, questioning and being scared of the new is simply ignorance and the opposite of what this planet needs for survival. So, what can we all do? If there's anything you guys take away from me today, I'd ask you to just take these 2 steps. And that is, step 1, try and get a climate education. Learning that my skirt was going to take years to decompose triggered a cascade of learning events for me. I read books, I attended events to learn from experts in the sustainable fashion field. So I ask you all to find the area that you feel most passionate about. Find out what the unsustainable holds are, what role you're playing in it, and how experts are trying to fix this. Who knows, you might have an idea that might be better at solving this. For me, that area was fashion. I grew up in India, a country of incredible artisans, a booming export industry, and where fashion is just generally very celebrated. So the more I read, the more I learned that every time I was going back home, the quality of our air was worse, or why the river in my city was polluted with clothing dye. I also learned that used clothing from the Northwest would end up on our shores in India to be burnt or dumped in landfill. And I also learned that most of that clothing was underutilized. So why were underutilized clothes in a landfill? Well, part of the reason is that we keep our clothes for far too long idle in our wardrobes before it ends up in a charity shop. By then, styles have evolved and those clothes are unwanted. Why were those clothes idle instead of being resold? Well, the reality is that selling clothes is a cumbersome process. And frankly, fashion brands have had no incentive to facilitate this. So this is an example of how a climate education led to building a system where customers can resell their garments within fashion brands' websites. And they can do so within 20 seconds. This is an example of how ignorance in sustainability has turned to strength and agency, and how it can do for you too. Step 2, get comfortable with imperfect sustainability. So the reality is that we're all on a journey. Sustainability is a spectrum, and our goal should be to move from the comfort zone of ignorance and indifference through the fear zone, where we fear the new, and into the learning and growth zone of education and implementation. The reality is, guys, that we're all going to make mistakes, you're going to get it wrong, and you're almost always going to feel like a hypocrite. But that's okay. The focus needs to be on progress and not perfection, because perfection leads to inaction. Instead, if we make small, imperfect decisions towards sustainability, then collectively they compound over time and can make monumental change. So let's take vegan leather, for example. That industry is far from perfect. Most of them are plastic, and the others produce more CO2 than its animal counterparts. But had we not bought into that industry, we wouldn't have reached where we are today. It is a testament of what consumer demand wants and the innovation that follows from that. Or let's look at electric cars, for example. When they first came to market, it was hailed as the green transport of the future. What we slowly realized was that the electricity that charged these cars came from coal-powered plants, and the batteries had a terrible environmental footprint. But today, because of the rise of renewable energy and improvement in battery technology, electric cars are now a truly sustainable mode of transport. And best of all, it is affordable and mass market, so can make a change. But I want to talk about something even more simple, like glitter. Now, we've all played with glitter before, and we've had it in, we've all played with glitter before, and even till today, it's used in cosmetics, and it's used in nail varnish. But that, in fact, is a microplastic that we use, we play with, and then we dispose. Those microplastics get into the soil, they get into the water, and even infiltrate marine life and the human body. October 2023 actually marks the month where the EU bans certain types of loose glitter. But luckily, we have cellulose glitter, so glitter that's made out of fruit pulp or wood pulp. When that first came to market, it still needed to be coated with a bit of plastic and aluminium, so it wasn't really biodegradable. But today, we now have a second generation of cellulose glitter. It's made out of nanoparticles of cellulose that's able to bend light to produce a vivid light of glitter. So now not only is it biodegradable, but it also uses way less energy to produce. Every time you choose to buy a sustainable product, even in its imperfect form, you're telling industries that you care about the environment. Industries respond by innovating, improving, and producing better solutions. Picture this. If you were to improve your habits daily by just 1%, it would render you 37 times better at the end of the year. So you didn't need to be the best, you just needed to be better by 1% every year. The same applies for sustainable habits and innovations. Sustainability thrives upon all of us making small changes in our daily life. Think about something like if you were to extend the life of a garment by just 9 months of active use, either by yourself or by passing it on to someone else, you would reduce its carbon, water, and waste footprint by 20 to 30% each. But we can't rely just on habits. We need to support the companies that are leading sustainable innovation. So the fashion brands that are choosing to truly extend the life of the garment, or the cosmetic industries that are choosing to use cellulose glitter. The next time you have a choice, I ask you all to think of that vegan leather skirt, to think about the power of the compound effect, and to choose progress over perfection. And if you have anything in your home that no longer brings you joy, pass it on and make sure it has a second home. Enjoy giving that same micro hit of dopamine to someone else that you once had when you first got it. My name is Tanya Saha Gupta, and thank you for listening.